Welcome. Gio is fresh off the boxing ring, the MMA ring training.
Sure.
Yeah,
We'll just call it getting my butt kicked. How's
getting your butt
that?
kicked, your butt kicked floor. And we're here with Sam Rosen, who just recently announced the merger of Deskpass and Breather. We want to get some details on that. Sam, thank you for joining us. I emailed them
Oh,
yesterday, and this morning he's like, I kind of have a cold, so we're gonna forgive if he sounds a little congested because I was like, oh no, you don't. We're doing it. So thanks for jumping
I'm.
in.
I've been waiting for my moment to be on the pod, so I'm stoked to be here. So
It
thanks for having
it
me.
shouldn't take such a notable occasion to have you in the pod, so we're glad you're here.
Hey, I'll take it, whatever it takes.
Okay, so we know the
That's
punchline. I would love to just like back up a little bit. You have such a history in co-working. I have to selfishly, I mean, I was in Chicago and you were my only point of reference for co-working. When I started I started at the very beginning of 2012 and I just looked on your LinkedIn. It said the Coop was open in 2008, which you'll have to tell us how you even knew about co-working. But I remember rolling into the Coop and looking around. I think maybe I did a day pass or something. And I was like, okay, all right. And it was all open space and it was adjacent to your agency, which you've been running forever. Run I You'll have to tell us what's harder, running an agency or desk pass or and wait, I forgot about what was the middle one? What was the software?
time. That's
Desk
time.
time. That's right.
Yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
it's been a long and a winding road.
totally.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
walk us
I
through
was
it a little bit. Give us the journey and then we'll dive into Desk
sure.
Pass and the recent news.
Yeah, I was looking at my LinkedIn recently because I've been telling people I've been in the industry for like 14 years. Apparently for like a few years too long. So it's been 16 years since I opened a co-working space, which
Crazy.
really, really messes with my brain. Like, and there are folks like you guys that I've known for a really long time, and it's just like it sneaks up on you, you know?
It does sneak
Um,
up on you. Wait, what did you do? But did you have the design agency first?
Yeah, yeah. So I started an agency called One Design. Still exists. I'm a
Yeah.
partner that's like very quiet.
Okay.
So I'm not active in the business, but I love it and it's a wonderful digital branding agency. And, the kind of short long story is, we had a small agency. We were always remote. And I had a girlfriend who moved from Chicago to Brooklyn, and I was schlepping to Brooklyn every few weeks. And I was working out of her garden apartment, and it was a terrible place to work. She was lovely, but like it was a very messy place with bad internet. And I had like my first really big clients at the time, and we dropped I dropped like our intro call like 5 or 6 times, and my colleague afterwards was like, "Bro,
No more.
yeah."
Figure that out.
So this was over 16 years ago. So I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went to the cafe down the street, which was called the Rabbit Hole, which I love, and like this
Rabbit.
hipstery Brooklyn bar, like bar cafe. Sit there, I get 2 coffees and a bagel, and I could tell that they like did not want me there, and I could tell because there was like, you know, the internet stopped working and then the outlet stopped working and there was like a table tent that said no laptops during lunch. I was like, okay, I get the message, but that was the only solution I knew. And a buddy of mine was like, have you heard of co-working? And I think I said the same thing that most people said at that time, which was co what? And went to the co-working wiki because that was like the most thorough list of all the co-working spaces in the world, and one was in Brooklyn, a few blocks away. And that place was called, and I love this name, The Change You Want to See, which I thought was such a dumb name at the time. But in hindsight, like this
Right?
place totally changed my life. So it was a co-working space and there were awesome people and great internet. And by the end of the day, I had a place to work and some new friends. And I was like, this is really cool. Who's doing this in Chicago? And the answer was, on that wiki, there was a list of people who wanted a co-working space, but there were no co-working spaces. So myself and my business partner at the agency we had two units next to each other, one that I was living in, and I moved out and turned it into a co-working space. And we grew from like 8 desks, and we ultimately scaled that to like 70, 80 desks, and we ended up selling it to Next Space, if you remember that, much longer. So we sold it because I'm a software guy, I'm a design and technology guy, and ever since I came across this idea of the office and where we work and how we work, and this idea of doing it in kind of a more flexible co-working way, I've really been obsessed. So I've built technology in that space for since then. And to your point, Jamie, we started with Desk Time, which was a tool to help manage co-working spaces, and Enterspace was an early
You
customer of
were.
ours, and learned a lot. And then, as we grew and learned, we realized, man, the opportunity here is not so much, at least for us, to build technology to help people, manage reservations and the kind of co-working management, but it's how do you actually drive awareness and demand and opportunity into these spaces, which have grown a lot. So that was sort of my entree into Deskpass and into co-working and into this world. And now this is what I do every day, and it's enough.
So, what drove the flip to Deskpass? And then Gio, I'll let you ask questions. So I'm totally taking over. I don't remember. I just remember Deskpass existing. And you and I had this conversation, I think, over tacos. I was kind of surprised because this was probably a few years ago now. Time flies. But, you were
Yeah,
like, it's kind of a blue ocean. Like, there's so much demand. It's like unlimited sort of supply side. But that being said, there's not a lot of supply side that I see is like really active and gets traction, like Desk Pass, Liquid Space. There's like it's like really 80/20 from my lens, but I'd be really curious. Yeah, sort of how'd you get into it? And then what do you think of the landscape? And we'll talk about, yeah,
yeah,
the recent merger.
yeah. I mean, I think uh, we were really early. And like, I think, a lot of people are like, you're in the right place in the right time. And I'm like, dude, I've been here 12 years. Like, where the hell has everybody been? You know what I mean? Like, we've been waiting for you. I'm hungry, I'm tired. So I think that's kind of how a big way how I feel and we feel. Like the idea of the growth of these workspaces is so obvious and so intuitive, and it doesn't take a very smart person to realize it was going to be a big part of the future, right? And started to see more and more supply. But at the beginning, it was just like trying to run a business, and the market was still very small for desk time. There weren't a ton of spaces. We're
Yeah.
talking thousands of workspaces, right? And they were all very different. Like the models were different, the pricing was different, so it wasn't like a one size fits all solution. Like every space that we worked with had a different pricing, a different requirement, which made like the software quite complicated, right? And then like most of the operators were pretty freaking frugal, so like it was the combination of like a complicated product that was for a small market that was frugal. And we learned a lot and interviewed and pitched and worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of workspace operators. And I think it was through that we really realized, man, the real opportunity here, there's lots of different solutions to manage workspaces and to solve them, and people were using like Mindbody and Google Sheets and a couple
Jerome.
other folks.
No, not people,
Shout
just
out to
Jerome.
Jerome. Man, that's so funny. And realize, man, if we could help create more awareness that these spaces exist and create more demand, that we thought that's where there was a real market
Maybe these
opportunity.
operators won't be so frugal and they can pay more for their software.
You said something. If you pay somebody a little bit of, if somebody pays you a little bit of money so that they can make a lot of money, like they'll take that deal every time, right? And so there was something there, and we came across ClassPass, and we were like, this is really freaking cool. And we thought in Chicago we could wire up. At the time there were about 30 spaces, and you could have one membership, which would be the least expensive membership in the market, and we could drive value and awareness. And so we tried it and we experimented because that's what we do. and it worked. Like out of the gates, it was like, oh, this is much easier to sell, and there seems to be more interest in this. And it, at the time, it was a $300 membership for 30 desks spaces in Chicago. Now we sell desks and meeting rooms and offices. We have over 2,000 spaces in 220 cities. So like it all grew very intuitively, but it just kind of grew from that core belief that like people need to know this exists and you need to make it so easy for them to try it. And that's really been our motto, ever since.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just the evolution's been amazing because I mean, we were talking about it off camera before, and I mean, just to get to this deal, everything from where you just explained to getting to this deal, there was so much in between that people didn't know about that really you couldn't talk about, but the rest of us in the industry knew. You'd been in conversations with a lot of big names.
Not
I
the
mean,
rest of us, just you, Gio.
the JLLs,
Gio
the
knows all.
JLLs, the IWGs, AY. I mean, and so it was a long time getting to the right deal, working with the right people to get to where you are, right? And so, it's been so interesting because how do you value this, right? I mean, it's like a whole new dynamic evaluation. So, how did that play out? I mean, obviously, I know you've got NDAs, all kinds of stuff you can't talk about, but how was the valuation process? How was it received by the greater co-working, really just commercial real estate industry, right? You were talking a lot of big names, some of them which were still trying to put their mind around what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the Wild West. And I think, the other things to like recognize is COVID happened, like, you know what I mean? And then we've been ventured back. So then there was like a very hard time trying to raise venture capital in office, where it's like even like the most sophisticated prop tech investors are like, I think I'm gonna mess with office right now. So like there's been, and then the market itself just maturing, the rise and fall of WeWork, like lots of really interesting adversity and headwinds and things to navigate. And I think, all of us that are still fighting the fight, those like market liquid space and the other folks in the industry. I think we've all had to kind of face this together and recognize like, look, this is about the pie and making the pie really big, and hopefully we all get a nice, delicious slice of pie, but being more focused on growing the pie and less so much of like taking, from each other and kind of growing the industry collective. So yeah, I think in terms of how do you value a deal like this or a business like this, there's no formula, there's no Harvard business case study. So in the different conversations we've had, it's always been really a value equation of like the value of the platform, the people, the technology, our brand and the experience, and then like the platform and how you partner and what the opportunity is and what the future looks like. And I think at the end of the day, one of the reasons that we're really excited about this opportunity is the people, like, the and the brands. I mean, Breather is a really cool brand, and despite like its sort of its journey, like I remember the first time I came across a Breather space in New York and I was like, this is freaking amazing. And like the fact that somebody was designing and building these like little beautiful meeting oases in the middle of like midtown Manhattan, or I'm in like River North Chicago. I was like,
San
whoa, this is
Francisco. I
a
think I must have seen one in San Francisco. An oasis is like the perfect term for it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Julian, the founder, was it's very much about being an introvert in a big city. So like the roots of it really weren't this meeting room office business. It's just there was real product market fit, and that company was doing tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars in revenue in just a few markets. And there was like this real product market fit that I think is undeniable. And they built such a cool, wonderful brand behind it. And then obviously the world changes, there's lots of leases and commitments and COVID. So they ran into some headwinds. But I like just was a user of the Breather brand and an admirer of it. So I was like very stoked when this opportunity came, you know, kind of came across the table.
Sam, what
You
does
know, and
Breather look like now?
we
I don't even think I knew that it was under the Industrious kind of group. Do they have this a similar model, or what are they doing now?
Yeah, Breather pivoted into a marketplace sort of at the end of its venture-backed run, and then as it navigated its way into Industrious, it really just focused on becoming a marketplace, and that marketplace is predominantly meeting rooms.
Okay.
So it's very similar to Deskpass in that sense that it's a really great, easy way to find these meeting rooms, which I think there's we've seen a tremendous demand in our business for as companies go remote, as they divest from the long tail of real estate. This notion of like we want to bring our regional team together every week or every month or every quarter and sit down together face to face and break bread. Like we've just seen that's been a huge growth center for our business, and that's what Breather does and does really really well. So, what's unique about Breather is they also have all of Industrious's portfolio on their
Yeah.
platform. And,
Huh.
talking about another brand, like just again, through the rise and fall and all the people and partners, like we were really excited to get to know the folks at Industrious and work with them that like, aside from, I think, building a really great product, and now I've gotten to go to like all sorts of interesting industrious spaces all over the country. They're great humans and they really believe the type of people you want to work with. And they're like, I think the right fit for a marketplace like ours, where we're working with thousands of independent operators. Like I run two little co-working spaces in Chicago. So like this understanding of like, we're not going to like defeat the world, but we're going to partner and create something greater and bigger than ourselves has been like really wonderful. So the ability to work with both of those brands and make a deal happen is like feels like a dream come true.
And I think that's one of the things I love most about, I mean, culture starts at the top, right? And so Jamie and Justin are so down to earth, and they're visionaries that care about their team and their clients, right? It's funny, I've spent the last couple days with a couple people that worked with Tesla that were early at Tesla, one that was there 8 years and one that was 10 and a half. And they were talking about how they just had the burnout, right? From being at Tesla with an Elon Musk that's a visionary that expects you to churn the amount of time that he does. And so it's just so interesting how people like Jamie and Justin, it's funny, Jamie, going back to our conversation with Jamie Adara, he's like, do you mind if I take this podcast from my house? We're like, well, that's exactly, we're a flexible community, right? So let's really focus on that. And, it's been awesome to kind of see that brand grow and bring on new investors with the CBRE brand. And then, we recently had Perry on, who does all the real estate for them, and he's just so down to earth. And
Also,
so,
I know, also a great guy. Yeah.
yeah, and brilliant too, right? I mean, he's a lawyer by trade, and so it's just the team overall. And then Breather, I know Breather at one point AY was looking at acquiring them. There's some different stuff. So there's been so many moving parts when you talk about Industrious, Breather, Deskpass, and then here we are, and it's all kind of come together. It's pretty amazing, and I know there's been a lot of energy and time and negotiations to get to this point.
So Sam,
Thank you.
what changes, or like what are the opportunities for Deskpass as part of a bigger group?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, like I think for our space partners, like nothing changes. Like we try to have what we think is the best support in the business, and like we really come from the ethos of being operators. So like it's just more better for
Yeah.
our workspaces. I think for desk, we get to add Industrious's inventory, and we have kind of a very unique relationship with them. So we'll have very special access to their spaces and workspaces, and they're growing rapidly on the Breather platform. There's so much opportunity to grow it because, at the end of the day, Industrious, which was incubating Breather, they're not a software company. Like they're more a real estate company. And so there's lots of software opportunities for the platform. And that starts with like, the Deskpass platform has 5, 6 the amount of spaces than Breather. So how do we add more spaces on the Breather platform? Breather sells meeting rooms, so there's opportunities to sell other things, desks and offices. And most of our business today are teams, right? And it's these teams that are looking for workspace solutions and want to kind of create entitlements and controls and access and really learn how their team is using this portfolio of spaces. So that's all new stuff that we can sell to Breather customers. And if you look at the Rolodex of who's been a Breather client since they've, not just recently, but since they started, I mean, you have every major incredible company that you can imagine. So a lot of companies already have a relationship with Breather, and there's just for us, there's an opportunity to get these teams and these companies to use this broader platform and ultimately get them in these wonderful workspaces all over the world that we work with. So there's lots of opportunity upside. And then, hopefully as Industrious only has a limited portfolio of spaces. So there's opportunities in markets that they're not in that we will have the ability to serve, and we think that this just creates kind of a better, bigger platform for our customers, both on the on the team and individual side, but also for all the wonderful spaces we work with.
What's the why for Industrious? Do their members get like special access, or why do they want to be in this and have an ownership versus just being on the platform?
I think there's a few reasons, and the best would be to ask them. But I think, fundamentally, like they've seen a huge growth in on demand in their business. Like they see more use cases around, I need a desk for a day, I need a meeting room for an hour. And so they saw this kind of category grow at a faster rate than I think they anticipated. And then they had this really interesting business, and I think they believed again that like by putting it with the right tech platform and the right team, they could really supercharge and power that. And then there's lots of interesting opportunities down the road about like extending networks and how do you kind of layer these pieces together. But I think fundamentally they just believe that on-demand access is what people are looking for and asking for, and this allows them to have a real relationship with one of the kind of the bigger players in the space.
So, first personal question.
Let's
What are you doing
go.
outside what are you doing outside of Deskpass? What I've always loved about you, Sam, is you're so passionate, right, about everything you do, right? And so as much time, energy, and as effort as it takes to get Deskpass to where it is, I mean, where do you find time to kind of unplug and just enjoy life? I mean, kind of what's your go-to?
I love, man, I got a wonderful family. So I got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old and my wonderful wife, Lindsay, and like, I got such a good base there that like, we're just at the stage of our little family that's where a lot of the time and energy goes. And it felt like I just like yesterday, I was just like, it fills my cup, man. Like it's so cool to watch these little kids grow up and be their dad. So that's first and foremost. Like you, Gio, I've been really into cold plunging. So I joined a little membership here called Beyond, which is in Chicago, which will soon be on the Deskpass platform. And I do this actually. Shlomo will be in town from X Bond on Thursday, and we're gonna go do a workout and a schwitz and a cold plunge. So I've been really trying to prioritize like wellness and health for really the first time in my life. I always sort of took that for granted. So that's been like a new, really wonderful thing for me, is just taking a little more time to take care of myself and my own body and my own mind. And then like lots of little creative projects. I love taking photos. Here, I actually am working on a project with the agency where we turned an empty floor that we had, which is where I work today, into a co-working space. And now we're trying to completely make it autonomous with this notion of like the agency was shedding all this money every month on a piece of real estate that we had a 5-year lease on that was empty. Meanwhile, it's this gorgeous office in like a gorgeous part of Chicago. So I've been working with them and Deskpass to see like, is there a playbook where we can turn this space and make it really autonomous and monetize it? And then maybe there's a way to riff with that, with what we're doing at Deskpass and Breather. But I just try to stay like intellectually stimulated and work with awesome humans and try not to burn myself out, which it's come close, but we're in a good spot.
So you said Shlomo's coming in town. Y'all gonna go do a cold plunge?
Yeah, man. That man's hardcore. He's like, the
I'm
cold needs
telling
to
you.
be colder, the schwitz needs to be hotter, and there needs to be at my bathhouse in New York, there's vodka. So he's a hardcore man.
They make Vikings differently.
They
Jewish
sure
Vikings
do.
are made very differently.
he's, he's one of my favorites.
Oh, he's amazing, and he's got a bunch of stuff going on too, which I don't know if we can announce yet. So we'll wait for the right time.
We'll have to have him on shortly.
I I was gonna text him and be like, and I was like, we'll just wait. But I think that's the beautiful thing. I mean, and you just touched on it, is our industry is like none other that I've experienced. I mean, I've been in commercial real estate for 23 years now, and big part of it was in retail and consulting and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, the community that we have and how close people are and how much people care about each other, like truly, honestly care about each other, right? Like, so your time with Shlomo is not about business, right? It'll end up being, personal that ends up crossing over to business a little bit, but everyone's really out to help each other and to lift each other up. And so that's what I love about what we've built in our little community. And you've been around, you and Jamie have both been around for a long time, right? I can't believe I'm over 10 years now, but 4.5 of that was on the dark side. So can't really count that. I had to earn my way out of that one, right, Jamie?
You've done good. I feel like a grandpa, which is so funny in this industry. Like I feel like many generations old, which is like the only place in my life I really feel that. But just to like double down on what you said, I mean, like even with this deal, I've had, some of our competitors and like reach out and just say like, good one, man, congratulations. And I don't know how much that happens in other places, but like I love, I love the people that I've met in this industry, and I've definitely forged some lifelong friendships and some really just fascinating, interesting people. Like the people who decide to like, this is where I want to focus my life and energy. Like I don't know, like it takes a weird, unique little.
Totally. I think that all the time. Like these beautiful humans that are also really smart and they decided to do this. Like, Nick with Common Desk and I mean, well,
Oh
the list
yeah,
goes on, and Mara and you. I mean, there's just a long, long, long list, but it's cool. As I love to go to the conferences and see people all in, one place. And you're like, there's just a lot of juice and a lot of goodness here. It's pretty unique.
it is. I love it. I really do. And I
Well,
think, I think one of the
years
things
later,
that's so
Sam.
cool. Well, I think this is the other thing. We're still at the beginning. Like, and I know that's hard for people to fathom. And I'm a grandfather, so I'm not sure how much I got left in me, like to when, the baby grows up all the way. But like we're still very much at the beginning of this. And it's been really one of the coolest things that we get to do at Deskpass. We work with company. I mean, we work with the US government.
Yeah.
We work some of the biggest companies in the world, but we mainly work with like mid-market, 50 employees to 1,000 employees. And we're talking to decision makers in those organizations every single day. And I think from that vantage point, you really realize like, oh man, like this is still the beginning. Like this is still people's first steps into flexible workspace and co-working. And I always used to use this like little indicator in my brain because one of our first tenants at the Coop, which was our co-working space, was Uber. And Uber went from one employee to they ran their entire Midwest operations out of the Coop. So I was an early Uber like rider at the beginning of Uber, and my test has always been the Uber test, where I just spark up a conversation with an Uber driver, and they say, "Well, what do you do?" And I say, "I do co-working." And I think we just got to the point where more than 50% of the people that I talk to have heard of co-working, let alone like the up brands, the platforms, the
Yeah.
solutions that exist today compared to before. So I still think like in terms of real market mass adoption, like we're just beginning and it's going to get so fun and so exciting and but yeah, it's been a minute.
Sam, what do you think is the future of marketplaces? I mean, you've been around for a long time, liquid space, but there are dozens of them, which kind of blows my mind. Is that still, is there really opportunity for everyone? I hear people getting, Deskpass, liquid space, Gable. I don't like Instant, if you consider Instant's kind of a broker, they're
Yeah,
not really a marketplace. Yeah, I mean, what do you give us like your 2 cents on,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
that
the
part of the
world
industry.
is the world is big and the industry is big. And I think if you look at like booking.com, which is probably like a good equivalent to what we're trying to, a lot of folks in the industry are trying to build, that really grew through M&A, right? It grew through regional roll-ups, it grew through product line roll-ups, like price line model, let's buy it. This group's really strong in this region, let's buy it, right? So I think like it's hard to the future opportunity for this when like we're at kind of a more mature market is global. It's which is so huge, and I think there's lots of opportunity for different players in different markets with different specialties. But I do think, over time, will that consolidate and aggregate? Will we see some of the marketplaces that have tried go away? I was just, for a board presentation, putting together like a list of like the broader competition and just reflecting on my competition list from that I've been keeping for a long time. And there's certainly a bunch of those folks that don't exist anymore. But there are great people coming into market every day. There are people that you and I didn't hear about 2 years ago that are making noise. So I think the need for an aggregator marketplace is absolute and kind of paramount in the industry. I think there's room for more than one. And but yeah, I think we'll see new entrants and more people leave and as new I think opportunities and the industry changes, you'll see tech platforms that kind of respond to that.
And you think we're still really early on the demand side also. Yeah.
I really do. I really do. And I think like some of our biggest accounts, like they're just a subset of a global team. Like, and it's like if you just scale that up, the opportunity is limitless. And so I hate to say it, but yeah, I still think
Yeah.
we're at the beginning.
It's a matter of time. I think we all just want it to go faster because the adoption curve has been a little slow.
Yeah.
But the meeting is interesting. I am one more question. I'll let Gio ask you something else. Given that there's so much demand in meetings, what would your advice be to the independent operator? Like, is there something for them to pursue there? Do you know what I mean? Like investing in real estate that's dedicated to meetings was always like a little risky, but now like there's a lot of demand for that. But what would be your advice?
It's a really interesting problem. I mean, what I can say is we're seeing a lot of demand for big
Right.
meeting spaces
Define that.
in
20 plus,
50 plus.
50 plus.
And
Right. Like, yeah.
and and we're seeing it in secondary and tertiary markets,
Mm,
right? As like an alternative to a hotel, banquet
yeah.
hall, or something like that. So I think like the big cities are pretty saturated and you have like amazing of like options in terms of meeting rooms and the convenience of the world that are like so high end and specialty. But I think like this idea of I have a sales force in this region and once a month, once a quarter, I want to bring 100 people together. I won't spare expense for that because it's important face to face time. And for our platform, like it's quite hard to find spaces that exist. So we actually
Right.
have to look at like,
Yeah.
can we work with hotels? Can we work with underutilized real estate? Are there other avenues to go? So I think just this notion of big meeting rooms is there's an opportunity for that. And in my experience of just being an operator, being kind of a student of the space, like I'm also like a big fan of modularity and flexibility because You know, like how do you activate a space in different ways? How do you respond to the market, especially if you're starting a new space? Like what you anticipate to be the use cases and demand of your space, like it probably isn't right. So not locking yourself in like a furniture or just
Yeah.
like design that's so rigid that you can't adapt and respond to the actual market. But
Yeah.
if I had endless resources, I'd probably be thinking about meeting rooms and secondary, tertiary markets for like big venues.
I mean, I would think there's probably some creative ideas for Industrious. It seems like a natural opportunity for their partnerships with landlords, like, underutilized space that they could convert. But even for some, creative independent operators who may be able to forge those relationships. Chris Hoyt and his wife with the Pioneer Collective, I know they did a little bit of that in Seattle, like just getting scrappy and kind of doing like rev shares with the landlords, because 50 plus meeting rooms, that's some significant real estate to put on a lease and take the liability
Yeah.
for. So
Well, and to get like a high premium for one day, but then for it to sit idle for a
right.
lot of time is
Yeah.
like a weird
Really hard.
risk dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I also like, the reason I got into this business and found it so fascinating in the first place is like I'm a design kid. Like I'm a design technology kid. And it was this notion of the underutilization of office space, right? And I think like that hasn't changed. Like 15 years ago, when there was no pandemic, like you actually think about these offices and the actual butts in seat utilization. And there were two stats that always blew my mind. One was in a city like Chicago, you don't have to build another building for the next 20 years if you just absorb into the city better. Like we have enough space. Like that's not the problem, right? And the other thing is like companies were saying my desk is utilized if someone's sitting in there for 3 hours a day. And it's like, I'm not a mathematician, but like that's like less than 20% of the day and night. So like there's just so much underutilization and emptiness. And we were always really interested in how do you create a more dynamic market and how do you help people with empty space activate that space and open up that empty space. And I think that will be part of the future. I think we're companies are more comfortable with remote, both in their own premises and outside of their premises. Landlords are more comfortable with the concept. Really, like the big lever is the financial institutions and the banks that value all this stuff and underwrite it. And I think they are finally starting to realize like what has worked for the last 100 years, not going to work for the next 10, and thinking differently about how they underwrite leases and mortgages and how they manage risk. And I think that is the biggest thing that like big dynamic that's changing that like as a design kid 15 years ago getting into real estate, I never would have made the connection of like empty space and pension funds and REITs and balance sheets and risk dynamics. But like there's this whole underpinning architecture that has really driven the outcome we have today. And you see that fundamentally changing. And that's why I think we're going to start moving fast and it's going to get really exciting.
Well, I think landlords have finally gotten to the point where they recognize this is not going anywhere, right? This is only going to gain more momentum and we're getting more buy-in, right? And I hate to say it, but the reality is there more of the white hairs that have been around for 20, 30 years in the industry are retiring, or there's asset managers moving into these roles, or even brokers that can explain why this is so important for these assets, right? But part of it too is the valuation side. Going back to how you valued this acquisition, it also the valuation has traditionally been in our industry, being the commercial real estate office world, has been on 5, 7, and 10-year leases, right? And so it's been such an education for people to understand that there is value in the shorter term overall deals, right? Whether it be 6 months or 12 months, or even in your case, right, is the fact that people are buying segments or blocks of time. And so it's taken time for people to really put their mind around it.
Yeah, but it's definitely changing.
So speaking of change, next personal question. And I'm jumping out on this one. So were you there for your first child's birth?
I was.
So
It
how
was at
did
my
your world
house.
change? How did your world change when what's his name?
JJ.
How did your world change when you got to hold first when you saw him come out, and secondly when you got to hold him, how did that change your world?
You know, I mean, it's changed everything. And I think like the most profound lesson my children have taught me, and I don't know if it happened in the first hold or for the first moment, which is so epically mind blowing that if you haven't been there, you can't possibly explain it or understand it. But I've always been a fairly, I have high aspirations for my life and myself. And my value system is certainly oriented somewhat around those outcomes. And I think the biggest epiphany of being a dad was, and I really like this question, was I remember sitting, laying in bed, reading a book to my son and thinking, holy shit, this is it. Like, this is the whole thing. This is the whole meaning of life is so I can like sit in this bed and read my son a book. And like, I think I might have like overcomplicated the whole thing. Like, I think I might have overthought this whole thing. Like, none of it really matters. Like, this is what matters. And it was a profound reorientation in my life. And I'm so happy to get to do deals like this and work with like the Marks and Jamies and of the world and but like it it doesn't, if it all went away yesterday, tomorrow, like it just doesn't matter. Like what matters is me getting to tell these stories to my kids and teach them stuff so they get to do it again if they want. And that's that's been the earth changer for me about having kiddos.
And I think the beauty of it is your journey to get to that moment and where we are right now and talking about it, it allows for you to impart that wisdom on other younger generations that are trying to do exactly what we did to grind to where we are today. And you ultimately realize what the purpose is not the purpose that you think it is, right? And so that's the really cool part about the journey you've been on. And as many people, again, building a community the way we've gotten to build, is you're able to have those conversations, right? You're able to see people grow and learn and really pour into people these things.
There's no doubt about
All right, Jamie, I'll let you have it back.
it.
Oh, well, what else do we want to cover? Do you want me to hit my last question?
Well, one more question then, since you don't have one, is, you were kind of talking about, leadership and kind of pushing forward, kind of what does this deal do to the leadership you bring in, both on your team and externally, right? I mean, you mentioned you've added new board members. I don't know if you can talk about those things, but I mean, that's a big part of it. Deals like this fundamentally change how business is done, right? And, we
Yeah,
try to say it's not going to change anything, but the reality is it does.
it's awesome. I think being an entrepreneur and starting a business, even with great partners who have come and gone and all that stuff, like it's a lonely endeavor and it's really hard for people who aren't active in it it's like being a dad. It's like hard to empathize. It's hard to understand like some of the pain and anxiety and pressure that you feel when you start a company and you have to pay people and make a living and try to grow something and you have investors. So I think one of the coolest things about this deal for us is in my career, I've been, building businesses for over 20 years. And like, this is my first like real board of directors. On our board is Jamie from Industrious and Evan from Industrious, who's fabulous. Rick Michaud, who introduced me to JLL and represents one of our biggest investors, and then Mark Rose from Avison. And I think that these are all like very wonderful, thoughtful, experienced builders of things. and they're really on board. Like, and I like literally and metaphorically. Like they're on board and they want to help us build something really awesome. And they bring kind of a, you know, when you talk about the, you know, the Mark Roses of the world that are managing billions of dollars in revenue and global companies, like it's really exciting and aspirational, and it's like you feel supported in a way that I haven't always felt. So that's really exciting. And then, you know, I think we just have this new platform between these brands that just gives us more opportunity to grow and scale and flex. So it's been really, really cool to get that level of support.
I have a related question that I thought about earlier, which is that you have built companies, you operate really pretty autonomously. Like are you more looking forward to being a part of something bigger? Like how does your day-to-day change? And is there any sort of like, I'm not sure, how this is gonna go, being just kind of an entrepreneur
Yeah,
that you're in charge?
always. Yeah, no, there's imposter syndrome on fire. I think, yeah, you're always just doing your best with the information you have at the time, and hindsight is a beautiful thing. But I think one thing that we really want for our company is we want to be like a really profitable cash flowing company, and we want to kind of remove the shackles of being venture backed and empower us to do that, and we're quite close to that. So I think like giving us the, you know, and being in that position, kind of autonomy to pick our own battles and not beholden to investors. That, you know, I think for me as an entrepreneur, like this is the first time we've raised money, and that was a really fascinating process. And just understanding like the benefits of raising money, the shitty parts of raising money, like and how it manifests day to day. So we're a small, scrappy team. We're going to remain that way as long as we can, but still provide kind of the scale and quality of business. And we'll build incrementally, and, you know, hopefully be in a position here pretty soon to really own our destiny and make the choices that we think are best for our partners and our customers, and then to build a business that we could be really proud of.
Better together. Okay, Gio, last
Definitely.
question. What's your karaoke song, Sam?
This is a really important question. And I
Mhm.
actually have this in my notes in my app on my phone because I'm not a karaoke guy and it terrifies me. So I feel like if I really had to do karaoke, I would have to be so drunk that I might not remember the name of the song. So some people have like in case of emergency in their phone book. I have in case of karaoke. And my song is Jump in the Line, you know, Harry Belafonte, Beetlejuice, because it is the
Mm.
perfect, because you could talk sing it. So it's like, shake, 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 senora, shake your body, line up. So it's like, it's very, like, I could pull that off. I feel like it would be a party favorite. I've
Totally.
never had the, I've never had to kind of leverage that in a emergency karaoke situation, but I am prepared.
Okay. That might be the most unique answer we've ever had.
True, true. In case
Totally.
of emergency, break glass.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It was great to catch up. We have to do it again. And
I would really like
yeah,
that.
hope you get a
Thank you
little,
for all you guys do. You guys are two I think some of the best people in this business, and it's really cool to see you share stories with interesting people. So thank you for what you guys do, and I really am honored to be included.
Well, thank you for being an interesting person.
totally.
Thanks.
Give Shlomo a hug for us. Are you going to be in Salt Lake?
Yeah, see you there.
Oh, awesome. We will see you there. Thanks, Sam.
Peace.
Take care,
Bye,
man.
guys.
Thanks.